A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, thanks for joining us. We begin this evening with a thankful heart. Yes, one of gratitude. Like all other programs, there is a cost attached to the production of my community. It requires money to do so. Today, two establishments in Barbados have demonstrated their understanding of the importance of documenting Barbadian history, sharing that with all via this program, and preserving for posterity. It is through the support of the People's Market in True Bridge, yes, they do it right, and General Accident Insurance Company Limited, Future Proof Barbados, that we are able to produce my community for you weekly. Thanks to the People's Market and thanks to General Accident Insurance Company Limited, two kind corporate citizens partnering with the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to ensure that my community stays on air and online. It is the intention of this program to celebrate the parish as set out by the Community Independence Celebration Secretariat. But that is not always possible because of the availability of content, that is, the willingness of individuals to come forward and speak about their communities. This week we have returned to the parish of St. Michael. Exactly where in St. Michael are we, Basil Mon?
Fontabelle. That's where I grew up. That's where my formative years were. I wasn't born there. I was taken there with my family after my great-grandfather died. I was about 6 or thereabouts. And then we moved to Fontabelle at that time. But that house is where my father grew up. It was owned by my great-grandfather. And funny thing, in those days, grandparents had a fair amount of authority. So he went to my, or rather, contacted my grandparents and basically said he wanted to bring up one of the children. So they had a fair amount of children. My grandfather was a tailor. My father was born in San Fernando in Trinidad. Contrary to what most people believe, he was not born in Barbados. But he would have preferred it that way. And so he came over and he grew up there and so on. My father, William Nathaniel Mon, was the first black druggist qualified in Barbados. And he lived there. He worked in Bridgetown for one spell, and he worked at Noel Roach in Speightstown for a spell. And he had to ride from Fontabelle to Speightstown and back. So you can imagine that's a bit of a journey. So at one point, I think he rented an apartment up there and would come home on weekends. He had to get up in the morning to deal with his stock, to feed his stock, because we always had, and even when I was growing up, we had the odd cows and pigs and chickens and so on. And so he would get up at 5 and feed them, go for a run down the beach and get a sea bath, and then go on off to work. He and his grandfather would swim out, not along the coast, to swim out about 100 yards in the direction of Pelican Island to what they call the Red Rock. The Red Rock was a big formation of coral that looked like an atomic bomb explosion. I didn't see like a reef around it. It seemed as if it was just coming up out of the sand, just like that, and curling over with brain coral on the top. A beautiful thing that I thought really belonged to the museum. But when they were dredging for the harbor, all of that got destroyed. But that was the lifestyle that he had. So that's where we went, the four of us. I have 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. So we grew up down there. And like when he was growing up, he would take us run, jog, all the way down to Paradise or Batstrock and back on the morning. And we get ready for school and so on. Fontabelle is situated to the northwestern corner of Bridgetown. So you start at Fontabelle from about Lakes Folly, which was the turn off by the traffic lights that would take you to the sewage plant. And from there on down to the turn off to Rihanna Drive, and a little further down what is now, what became Spring Garden, now Mighty Griner Highway, down to the playing field. That was Land's End. Right? So it was a cul-de-sac in a sense. And basically, if I told anybody I lived in Land's End, nobody knew what the heck I was talking about, nor where that was. If I said I was from Lower Fontabelle, everybody knew, so usually I said Lower Fontabelle. But for the address, if you're writing a letter, it was Marine Cottage, Land's End, St. Michael. Now, the house was not really a cottage. It was a little bigger than that, but the name gave it a cozy atmosphere. And Marine, of course, was right by the sea. So when I came home from school, I would down bag, off glasses, off uniform, on swimsuit, in the sea. And before I go any further, I need to point out that Fontabelle at that time was wholly residential. It was a mixed race, a mixed class neighborhood. Most of us didn't know what class we were in anyhow, and neither did we care. But that is kind of the atmosphere. The white families tended to keep to themselves, and we tended to keep to ourselves, and as I say, neither the twain shall meet. But basically, we would be neighborly, most of them anyway. And a number of people who lived there, people pass in and out of Fontabelle. And most, if not all, of the people who lived down there did well in their lives. Let me call a few names. Of course, going south, that was on the seaside, Tower Town, from where we lived, there was a house which a number of people lived in. I think the first name I remember was a Clark, but then there was the Corbins, Graham Corbin and family, Richard Corbin, who became a psychiatrist and had a very good career as a psychiatrist. He and his sister Jenny lived next door to us on the right-hand side for a spell. And then the Marshalls came. This was Trevor Marshall, not the Trevor Marshall most people are familiar with, but that name. And his sisters. There was Marina, who was a very beautiful girl. Marina became a carnival queen. I think she was the second carnival queen in Barbados. And then the two younger sisters, Lauren and Leo, were more like my age. Those others were older. And after that, there was the Utam Shandani family. Now, Utam Shandani and his very beautiful wife lived there, but he was very communicative. Now, we tended to play a lot in the front yard, whether we were playing cowboys or war or cricket. We played in the front yard. And if you hit the rules were, if you hit the ball over the fence, that's 6 and you're out. And then you have to go and get the ball. And Mr. Utam did not like us knocking the ball over the fence and would not give us permission to come and get the ball. So we had to wait until whenever he got the grass cut, which wasn't too often. And we'd tell the guy, if you see any balls, they belong to us, throw them over. So we usually, if he see any, he would collect them, tell us come for them. And we would come. I remember one occasion we collected about 6 balls at one time. These are what they call composition balls, which was a corkish type of ball, but it could still hit you fairly hard. And we used to get them from Woolworth. They were fairly cheap. We get them from Woolworth, and we play cricket and so on. But we always had a couple of feelers and like extra cover to catch the ball. If you hit it too high, you're out. 6 and out. So after that, we had another Utam Shandani family. It may be his brother or cousin, I don't know, but this was this gentleman and his wife and 2 little girls. And they lived there, I think, for all the time we were there after that. And there was Padma and Sheila. Sheila was the elder of the 2. Before we get back to them, let's go further down. Right after that house was where Senator Watson, John Watson, and his parents lived. And they lived there. And then after that, Captain Ferguson, George Ferguson, and his children, Billy, Bunny, and Nancy. And then there were the Archers, Edwy Archer and the other brothers. Edwy was one of the best piano players I have come across in Barbados. Second only, I would think, to Judy Graham, who I think was the daughter of Captain Graham, a schooner captain. She married the cyclist Ken Farnham, and then they lived in New York. the rest of their lives. But she was a wonderful piano player, and I think she would be classed on a level, if not higher, than Sean Jackson, right? And after that, there was another house, which I believe was the house in which the Veres lived, Ronald and George and his sister. Then there was another house where some other people lived. There was a white family who lived in there. They would speak, but they'd say much else. Further down, you had Captain Van Slyteman, Lawrence Van Slyteman, who was brought over by Earl Barrow to be the pilot for the Bridgetown port. So he would sail the cruises in. Short gentleman, originally from Guyana. Captain Van Slyteman had a deep voice, a guttural laugh, a very pleasant guy, very serious guy, but very pleasant. And his wife, Edith, and his daughter Imelda lived in that house. And after that, we got the Gibbses, Laurent Gibbs and his parents, his family. And then there was an open space. And just about where the car park begins now, across President Kennedy Drive, was Wilfred Ferguson, who was a lawyer. And he and his son Robin, who at one point was aide-de-camp to the governor. After that, there was, I remember, a lot of trees and a rundown house. And I think I remember breaking a glass window on that just for the heck of it, just because I wondered if somebody was actually living there, but nobody was there. And then there was the guest house right opposite Pickwick Gap. There was a guest house there, a two-story building. It's demolished now after being occupied for a number of years. And that was owned by a Dominican family. Their two elderly sisters ran that. And they had people from as far as Jamaica come in there, and very pleasant ladies with lots of fruit trees in the backyard. They had hog plums, guava, they had sugar apple, you name it, she had it. So they would invite us sometimes to come and pick fruit, because they could deal with all of them. It's just too much of it. So we would get some fruit, and I love a sugar apple. From the time you pass Pickwick Gap, then you have bigger properties on the seaside, and the wealthier people who lived in Fontabelle tended to live in that area. All right. Coming up, however, on the right-hand side from where we live, on the left-hand side, which is the land side, this is going toward town. You had right on the corner, there was a building that's demolished now, it's just an open lot. And then you had the Cheesemans. Cheeseman was a white guy, much older than his wife, and one daughter called Liz Ann. Then there was the large property of Holborn, which is now all the gas station area and the tanks and all that was Holborn, where Greg Downey lives. Greg and I became very friendly, and we remained friends all throughout our lives. And after that, there was just about where just behind the statue now, because that area was Armstrong Labs as that came up. And just after that was a building that was a bar and restaurant. They had music there, and you could go and dance. I had a good time there a couple of times. And after that was the Dorley's Bottling Company. That was probably the only industrial enterprise that was in Fontabelle at that time. The Armstrong Labs came after. And right at the corner of Pickwick Gap and Fontabelle Road. And there was this big mock-up of a macaw. And it had some motor on it, so when that motor was on, the macaw would bend over and you would hear some noise coming out of it, and it would be lit up and so on. So at that point, that was more brightly lit than the rest of the street. Further up, just on the other side of Pickwick Gap, again going further to town, you had St. Mary's Rectory. So that was run by Father Frederick Lane and his family, 2 boys, 2 girls. The girls again were my age. And further up then, you know, it becomes a little difficult knowing this, because I used to write up there a lot, but I didn't know who was living there. There were a couple of Indian families living there. And of course, Herbert House is just as you pass the Pickwick Gap, where the Legends thing is now. And after that, currently, there's lots of enterprises, commercial enterprises. There it was all residential. On the left-hand side, you had Geoffrey Greenidge, who was a former cricketer. He and his family lived there close to Kensington New Road. There was a Piprawala family who were Muslims who lived there. I'm not sure if they were on Fontabelle Road proper or in Kensington New Road, but they lived in that vicinity. One of the bigger properties on the right-hand side, which is the seaside, again close to that, the Kensington New Road, Lakes Folly Junction, was Annie Wilson's property, large property, very well-appointed house. He lived there with his family. And after that, then you're talking Lakes Folly, the now the traffic lights and Cheapside, the Cheapside Market. Going up Westbury New Road, which is now Rihanna Drive, you had an old rundown house, chattel house. They had a door, there were a lot of bric-a-brac and thing inside. There's an old gentleman who used to live there, very old, short, very pleasant, smile. He was very welcoming. His name was Pa Joe. We called him Pa Joe. I don't know what his surname was. Pa Joe used to make some of the best wheat bread I've ever tasted. The only thing comes close to this is now an outlet near to Ruins in St. George. I'm not going to call the name, but most people know what I'm talking about. That was probably the only thing that tastes like that, as close to that. But Pa Joe's were bigger, and it was a penny, 2 cents. So they were called penny loaves. And I remember my father being a bit upset when the price went up more than 100% to 5 cents. And you know, why could you make a jump, such a big jump? But prices had been going up and so on and so forth. So penny loaves moved to 5 cents, but we still call them penny loaves. Then Pa Joe died, I don't know, he would have been about 95, 92, 95 at the time when he died. And that lot has been empty ever since. Right after that comes the Morrises. Leonard and Dick and Marcia and Dan Morris and their parents. And I'm really pleased to see that Marcia and Dan still live there. And the house, they've kept it well taken care of, well looked after, all during the years. But there and Steve Sargent, Baba was his nickname, which is, Baba's almost like next door to them. They're still, so they're the only real contacts we have of people we know who are still in the district, whereas everything around them has become commercialized. And after them, 1 or 2 houses after that was Lemon Grove. Lemon Grove is a big property, and well, it's empty now, but that's where Cameron Tudor lived, Sir James. Right next to us, going down Land's End now, right next to us was Mrs. Elsie Burroughs. Elsie Burroughs was, well, I should say is, because as far as I'm aware, she's still alive. I haven't seen her for years. A founder member of the Democratic Labour Party. Now here's the rub. My father was invited to be a founder member of the Democratic Labour Party. Now he was part of what I call the Grantley Adams generation. And not surprising, he knew Elsie Burroughs, he knew George Ferguson and Cammy Tudor. They all grew up together. And my father declined the invitation. My father was a decent guy, hard-working guy. He worked hard with his family all his life, but he could never be accused of being diplomatic. So I'm not going to repeat what he said, but the answer was not too pleasing, and he was never forgiven. So, I mean, many years later, when he brought an invitation card and showed me, it was an invitation to join the Minister of Health, who was at the time Branford Tate, at a function at Culloden Farm. And he looked at me and asked me if I thought they made a mistake. So I smiled. I said, well, maybe they did, but it's an invitation, so go along and enjoy it. So he went, he and my mother went, but that was years later. But going further down Land's End side now, you had the other Morris family, which is Michael, Tony, and Mary Morris, who are cousins of Leonard and the others, and their family. This is kind of obliquely opposite. But right opposite us was a big grey wooden house. And I remember there was a white family living there. I remember there was a boy, and his father was cruel. He used to beat the crap out of that boy. But for little or nothing, no reason. And maybe because he used to speak to us. So I believe that was the reason. And usually he would be inside after that. But I would meet him years later, and he turned out to be a very decent guy, a very likable guy. That area now is fenced in with galvanized fence, and it's empty. The house has been demolished. Further down, about 100 or so yards down Land's End, you had on the land side, there were only a couple of houses on the seaside, and then the water came in toward the road, up against the road. But further down now, you had Mrs. Evelyn Clark, and her husband Jack. Evie Clark was a piano teacher, so she taught piano lessons. I went to piano lessons to her, and so on. And eventually, I can't remember if it's after she died or not, maybe. But Bobby McKay, Bobby Allen, she was then, and her two siblings, Cindy and Joel, lived there with their parents. And right after that, next door to them, again on the land side, was a gentleman who used to keep dogs, some vicious-looking dogs. After that, then there were a couple of white families, and then there was the RSPCA, and so on. And then you got to the end of the road where Indian River was. Indian River was more an outlet, inlet really, because it's been canalized. I think there was more. And when you had heavy rainwater runoff, it would come through there, but it was like a mangrove swamp almost. And where that is now, that was up against the open field, which used to be a playing field. Now it's a grazing ground for cows and a lot of weeds and stuff. But just where the Indian River ended is the Indian ground. As you may realize, it's still an open field. That was a burial ground, a mass burial ground for cholera victims in the 1850s. Now, I have an article in the Advocate which mentioned which was, I think, a copy of or a reference to an article from the 19th century where they looked at the attitude in Barbados to the possibility of cholera coming to Barbados. And I remember reading that, and actually I looked at it recently, as a matter of fact, and I was looking at the rather lackadaisical attitude we had then to cholera, and there were some people who were advising us against taking that attitude because it had already been in Jamaica and was ravaging Jamaica. But to look at that attitude then and to look at the attitude now to the coronavirus pandemic, they were like a very different thing. If we had taken that lackadaisical attitude to coronavirus, we would have been in deep trouble, you know. But that was it. It was a burial ground, and I think one of the reasons why that has never been disturbed is that there was a perception, at any rate, that the germs of cholera live for Lord knows how long. And so anywhere you have a cholera burial ground, you will find building on it. And the canal that we have now next to Courts is pretty much around there. And back in the day, there were lots of coconut trees rather, out there, and some boys used to play cricket there as well. It was compacted, solid compacted earth, but you can, if you went over the road, which was like a 4-foot drop in the sand area by Indian River, Once you cross that, you could ride through the open area. You butt up against onto Deacon's Road, right in the bend, and go up Deacon's Road. The border of Fontabelle, just after the houses going down Land's End, I think, was Paris Tenantry. So Paris Tenantry ran from there east to Westbury Road. Westbury Road, of course, stretched north to the junction with Deacon's Road and Goodland Road. And then it would run straight across to the junction with Baxter's Road, Barbary Hill, and Passage Road. But the cemetery, which looked onto Westbury Road, Westbury Cemetery, which is one of the oldest and possibly the most crowded cemetery in Barbados. Westbury Cemetery stretched all from the Goodland Road, Deacon's Road Junction, all up to President Kennedy Drive as it exists now. Back then, there was no President Kennedy Drive. Right? It was just Fontabelle Road and some houses behind Holborn. So that was the kind of parameter you had. I don't want to go too far along Westbury Road, but you had St. Leonard's Church and Westbury Primary and so on. And you had some Indian families up in St. Leonard's Gap, but they were Hindus. The Indian families who lived around Kensington were Muslims. So the two of them, they never lived side by side. But there we go. Let me say, first of all, I'm a city boy, born and bred in the city or suburbs. Everywhere I've lived, whether for a short time, as in the US, Panama, Colombia, Peru, I've always lived in a city. So for us, and for me, a trip to visit a friend in the country was a treat. And something to look forward to, because we didn't have that experience. However, that's not to say that I was totally ignorant of farm land goings on, because our backyard was essentially a farmyard. So in my time, I know we had some stalls where they had cows when my father was younger, but we never had that many cows. We usually only had about one or two. And so when we had cows, we drank cow's milk. Whenever we had goats, we drank goat's milk. And my father would get the cream off the top of the cow's milk and make butter with it. So we added a little salt. It was just too fresh otherwise. You had to shake it up, shake it up, shake it up. And he would make good butter out of that. And the chickens, when we were going to eat chickens, we got one from the backyard. I remember I was 13 years old. I remember to this day when we ate our first chicken bought from a supermarket. My mother went and bought this thing, come home all smiles, and I said, "What on earth would you buy a chicken from a supermarket? We got chickens in the backyard." I think she did it for the hell of it, just to say she bought a supermarket chicken.
And no doubt they ate and enjoy their supermarket chicken. There are many benefits of sharing your community's history. In addition to learning about culture and the evolution of our island, it instills virtues in our youth, making them aware of their own roots, families, customs, and traditions. On a deeper level, however, telling the stories of our communities could help our youth form their own identity. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community. We'll be back next week.